Okay, I've already done a test of the new iPad, the 2018 iPad, because it's compatible with the Apple Pencil. I did that test, I did a drawing test, and I did some comparisons with the iPad Pro. But I thought I would do one of my regular style tutorials on the new device because it's a smaller form factor and there are some differences in terms of the latency of the Apple Pencil compared to the newest iPad Pros, and there is also the gap between the pixels and the Surface and the nib. So I'm going to do my tutorial this week just to see whether there is any difference to the kind of thing that you can do compared to an iPad Pro, and we'll see. I have an idea of the kind of thing that I'm going to create. I think I'm going to do it in two parts. So I'm going to do the sky first on this video, and then I'm going to do a follow-up video which shows the rest of the landscape. Now I've got an idea of a scene that I'm thinking I'm going to want to do. So it is going to involve water and sort of rocky, mountainous kind of shapes. But like I say, for today, for this first video, I'm just going to start with the sky and the clouds. Now I've already selected the kind of color range that I'm going to use, and these top colors here, the top 5 colors, are the colors that I'm mainly going to use for the sky itself. That isn't to say that I won't use some kind of combination of the two, and obviously when they overlap each other it's going to create new blends of different colours and in-betweens, but largely speaking I'm going to stick to this kind of colour palette. If you want to be able to follow along exactly to the tutorial, I am going to leave the hex codes down in the description. Now just to explain to you what that is, if you go to value along here, this app is Procreate. All my tutorials are in Procreate. If you go to the value button here within the colours, you'll see that all the colours have different values, and they also have a hexadecimal code, and these are the codes that correspond to the exact colour that I'll be using. So I'm going to put these exact codes. All you need to do is select that area, type in the code that I've supplied down below, press done, and then it should select that colour. Then you just have to create all your palette yourself. So once you've got the colour, then you can press in there and start to fill in those different colour values. But anyway, so to get started, I'm going to start with what is the bluest kind of colour in the mix. Now, if you actually isolate the colour, the interesting thing is that it isn't a blue colour. It is a greyed out version of a kind of orangey yellow. So you can see on the actual colour spectrum here that it is in the orange spectrum, but it is a very greyed out version. Now it's strange, but when you put it next to other colours, then you'll start to see it's sort of, by contrast, it almost looks blue, even though it isn't blue. But you'll see that effect as I go further along. I'm using a airbrush. I'm just going to start with a soft airbrush. I'm not going to vary from the airbrush. I'm just going to keep it very simple. I always keep it very simple on my tutorials. In the future, if I find it necessary to start using different textured brushes, then I may introduce that. But for the majority of the time, I'm trying to get across how to structure a painting and what to put where fundamentally. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to fill this whole area in with the colour. So I've got the colour selected, it is the first colour here, my colour selection. I'm just going to grab the colour, pull it into the area, and you'll see it's filled the whole screen. Now, depending on what the camera manages to pick up, but it isn't a strong blue colour, but it will become more blue-like when I put other colours next to it. The next colour I've got along here is this kind of colour. Now it's not far removed, it's slightly more intensely orange, and also slightly less of the grey in it as well. So what I'm going to do with this colour is I'm going to, again on the soft airbrush, perhaps turn it down, is I'm going to have that coming into I'll just reduce the size of the canvas there, it's interfering with the button slightly. I'm going to have the blue blending into the blue effect in the sky, blending down to this orange. And even already, when it was on its own, you could really tell that was not a blue. But as soon as you put a brighter orange next to it, then it has the strange effect of appearing more blue-like by comparison. Colours are very strange. Sometimes when you can really isolate the colours, you will be surprised. I'm not going to worry too much what's going to be doing down the bottom of the canvas, because I will be doing some water and rocky kind of elements as well. So I'm just going to really focus on this upper half of the canvas. Now I've separated the kind of two tones of the background sky. I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to start showing the impact that the sun is having on the clouds. Now the sun itself is going to be off camera or off canvas, but the impact that the sun is having is going to be obviously having an impact on the clouds themselves. It's not always necessary to feature the sun itself within the frame, but obviously the impact that the sun is having is going to be clearly seen. So I'm going to, again, using the airbrush. I'm always using the airbrush on this piece. Just starting to lay down some texture, some shapes, some broken kind of cloud forms. I've not got the opacity on full, but at the same time we've got the pressure sensitivity of the Apple Pencil rather. So sometimes I'll be pressing on lightly, sometimes I'll be pressing on more firmly, and we'll get a variety of different strengths of yellow because of that. Some of this yellow is going to be obscured. I'm going to go over it with some other colours, like darker colours. So I've got some sense of the yellow down. I'm going to create another layer, and with this layer I'm going to go straight to the more orange colour. It's a bit more intense than the first orange I used for the background, and I'm going to be careful how I use it now. So I'm going to turn the opacity down. I'm going to start going over some of these yellow formations, especially at the top of the yellow shapes. I want to leave the bottom part of the clouds fairly bright, fairly yellow, standing out a lot more by contrast, because I'm imagining that the sun's lower down and it's going to hit the underneath of the cloud and really make that part of it stand out a bit more, whereas the top bit is going to be more obscured by thicker cloud. That's how I'm imagining it anyway. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to go to the darkest colour here now. I'm going to use this to start really getting some of the intense, thicker formations in the sky as well. So I can really allow the clouds to become much thicker and darker over this side, because the sun is more on this side than that. So as they get more over here, away from the sun, you'll definitely see a darkening up and thicker kind of cloud effect. So I'm going to go back to my orange layer and back to the orange. I'm going to start really just narrowing in a little bit. So I'm going to reduce the size of the brush just a small amount. And maybe in some of these areas that are even more to this side of the frame, I'm going to start going around the edge of some of those forms, especially on the lower region of the clouds. You will also get some maybe flattening out of the forms as it goes across the sky. And as it goes over here, maybe a more intense version of the same thing. So I'm going to blend in some of this yellow in with the orange. And I might even, because I did this quite deliberately, quite textured, I didn't have it on full opacity, so when I was going over certain areas, you'll notice that there are some grey areas that are thicker than others. I did this in quite a random way, but I can now start to make some decisions, maybe going in between some of those shapes with some more intense orange. Bear in mind, this layer is underneath the darker layer, so you can't really overdo it at this stage, which is good. I probably will create another layer, and then just to fine tune where I want exactly that orange to be on top, I can do that on an above layer. But to begin with, I'm just doing some layer underneath the darkest layer clouds, if I just show you. So the darkest one is on top. So now when I'm adding the orange on the underneath, I don't have to worry too much about it overpowering the grey. So it's having its impact. It's almost like it's illuminating the sections of cloud that are underneath the darker bits and behind that. So that works quite well, because obviously the sun is going to be behind the clouds. So I can allow it to just start to show at the bottom edge, and then I can also just fill in the clouds as well. I'm just going to perhaps increase the strength of the orange in this area. It's going to really give the yellow a context, a place to exist. Perhaps that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to go back onto the dark layer, select my dark colour again. I'm just going to start refining it up some of those shapes. So I want a slightly smaller airbrush. I could use a combination of the brush itself and perhaps an eraser. So if I decide that there's too much of the grey in a certain area, I can always go back to I'll go on the eraser. I think I still need to use a soft airbrush, but I could use that now to start really taking away some areas of the dark grey, just refining up some of those shapes. Maybe create some breaks in the dark cloud areas. I wouldn't say there's such one way of creating a cloud effect. This is just one. When I've created a cloud in the past, I've perhaps gone about it a slightly different way, found a different way in and different routes to the same kind of effect. Sometimes I will just start with a darker cloud and then add some lighter edges. So you can see I'm constantly adjusting the size of the airbrush. If you keep it the same size constantly, you're not going to be able to really create a variety of shapes and texture. Sometimes what I want is just smaller forms, sometimes I want to fill in a large mass. I'm going to go back to the orange layer and the orange colour. I'm going to work into refining that a little bit more, especially having it pick up on the bottom edge of some of these cloud areas. It's almost like it's outlining some of the darker shapes, definitely on the bottom, and then sometimes when it's a smaller shape that has become sort of more isolated from a bigger bank of clouds, it might have orange that goes all the way around it perhaps. I'm going to go back to the yellow layer just to really help refine some of that. So again, I can use the layer that's underneath the orange. I can go a bit more intense, knowing that it's going to have an impact coming through the orange, but it's not like just doing the yellow on itself, on its own. It's got a thin layer of orange to try and break through first, so it's not going to be overly intense. I'm going to go back to my orange layer. So I'm going to do just the last bit of refinement. I'm going to just try and make a bit more sense of some of these forms, take some of the dark edges a bit closer to the edge. So I've got an outline perhaps, but I just want to make the dark mass of the cloud nudge a little bit closer to that edge, make that fine line a little bit finer, make some bit of the dark clouds a bit denser, a bit thicker, have some little blobs that seem to grow off of the main formation. What I would recommend is don't try and copy these exact shapes. You're after the effect, so don't think it's necessary to put the same exact forms. Just let the effect work for you. Whenever I'm working from an image or a reference material, I don't think I've ever tried to copy it. Well, not in recent times. If I'm working on a piece of work, I certainly don't try and copy what I see in front of me on a photograph. I just take the effects overall and try and make it work for my own image. Just the last bit of refinement with the orange. Again, I'm going to use this just to sharpen up some of those edges. Perhaps the bit where the yellow fades out, I'm just going to extend that edge with the orange a little bit more. And as I said before, I'm just going to create one more layer. I'm going to put this on top, and I'm going to use the brightest colour, the yellow, just to really make some strong highlights in certain areas now. And I want to be quite sparing with this, so I'm turning the size of the brush down. I just want to really have some powerful, intense yellows just in one or two areas now. Okay, so I'm going to leave the sky tutorial there for now. Please make sure to press the bell symbol next to the subscribe button to make sure you catch the second part of this tutorial. I'm releasing it the next day, following on from this video. But if you watch this video a few days after I've uploaded it, there should be part 2 up in the corner. If not, then please come back tomorrow on the Sunday and you will see part 2. I do lots of other kind of demonstrations and tutorials, from landscapes to elemental kind of forces, so please check those out. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people that are supporting me over on my Patreon page. There is a link for that down in the description as well. Catch you in part 2. See you later.